Hi everybody, welcome back to my wormery. Today's just going to be an ordinary feeding. I just figured I would film and keep you guys in the loop with what's going on. Just to give a bird's eye view, here are the two sister bins. They're in terrarium mode right now, so trying to keep the moisture from evaporating off and keeping it on the upper surface of the material so that maybe the worms will be inspired to come out of this material and kind of work the surface a little bit too. So this is the bin, the October 31 bin that was used for composting that pumpkin that I made a time lapse of. If you haven't seen that, it's worth checking out. And down here are just some other run-of-the-mill bins. And this one's from November, and this is from most recently, just a few weeks ago, about 3.5 weeks ago. I'm just going to feed these bins and just keep the camera rolling to check out what's happening. Ooh. I feel the weight of that. It's really putting a strain on the handle. I got to be careful lifting this thing. So it's very heavy. It's probably a lot heavier than you think if you've not handled a worm bin of your own. What do we have here? We got good stuff today. Cantaloupe rinds, soup greens. We always feed a little bit of used coffee grinds. They seem. All right, let's get these guys fed. I think this is working just as planned. I always felt like the top surface was rather dry, and it's probably because it was so dry I felt like it was not being run over as much as I had hoped. And this is what I was hoping for, was just to find, worms out here on the surface. All right, this was the feeding zone, so I'm gonna just add a little bit of space for me to drop extra food into. There we go, get a little bit of red wiggler action down here. There's an apple. What's that? Oh, a potato. Kind of making a mess here. Some of the stuff I added during the last feeding is showing up now. I'm just moving it aside to make space. So this bin was fed down the middle for the longest time, like all the bins are, until it's time to start getting them ready for migration and harvesting. Then I started feeding the bin on the opposite side, and I sort of felt like I was almost at the point where all the population was hanging out on the feeding zone on that horizontal migration. And then I reversed it. So then I stopped feeding over there maybe about a month ago almost now, and started feeding only here. And now I guess the idea here is to sort of sweep the population back and forth through the material to get them to eat up all the stuff they encounter. I think I've been pretty generous with the grit and the bedding lately, so I'm just going to add food. A few pieces of soup veggies. Okay, delicious stuff. So I guess what I'll do is I'm just going to grab some of this dry stuff that was off the surface back here. To get that down into the feeding zone too. Get this thing covered and back up on the shelf. I think this was the bin that had yeah, there it is. That chestnut sort of thing. It's been fumbling around in the bins for months and months now. Obviously this is going to continue to remain very active with food, but everything over on the other end sort of has to be deemed as done and ready for harvesting at some point too. So I see fair amounts of good sized food chunks that they would still need to eat throughout here. Yeah, there's probably enough food in here still to keep them busy for a while. So, okay. Let's get the other sister bin out here. Just gotta be careful with this grip over here. So once again, this is the feeding zone side. These are looking quite nice here. I think here too we're going to find similar stuff because the sister bins have been managed in a very similar way. So I wouldn't be surprised to find an apple and a potato. But I'm really not going to go out of my way to try to find them right now. I really just want to create space for the extra food and get these guys back to the shelf. Just take some of these larger pieces, return them to the hole, like so. I got a feeling these pieces of melon are going to be pretty popular. Although I think these soup greens are also very much liked in my bins also. Delectable feast for the wormies. And let's get this stuff covered back up too, and ooh, this one feels so light compared to those two. This bin's really got a lot of catching up to do. This is the bin that the pumpkin was in. So if you watched that video, you'll see bits and pieces of it, including the stem of the pumpkin, which I've been trying to sort of preserve as time goes on. I think this was bread. It's almost gone. It's just little shreds anymore. Definitely feel that the top of the surface is drier, but like most of my bins, you just go down a little bit and you can already feel the moisture level being just fine. So here we can see some of the food that's still being worked on from the last feeding, still quite green in color. Seems a little bit dry down here, if I do say so. Maybe not so much, because if you, oh, okay, yeah, look at this. It's still kind of drier and more crumbly than I think would be ideal. So I'm going to, you know what? I'm just going to feed. I'm just going to trust that the moisture levels will be fine. Larger chunks, except save that. And let's give this bin a nice big fat feeding. Still in catch-up mode, I think, in terms of only having had that pumpkin for the longest time over the past couple months. Give them a nice, good, hearty amount of food. And this I intended for them as well, this nice big chunk of real juicy stuff. Down here. Good stuff. Might not look so much, but the amount of coffee that I added is a fair amount. If it looks this way in another day or two, maybe I'll add a sheet of ice off of the top of the pond. Give these guys a little bit more moisture. But for now, I just want to see what this hunk of honeydew melon does. Hopefully it helps increase the moisture level without me needing to add water specifically. Not that that's a bad thing. It's not a problem. If I have to, I'll certainly do it if I have to. I'm just trying to see if I can manage moisture levels with just the feedings and the food. On this one, maybe I could even lay down a second sheet of paper just to provide one more extra, or maybe another piece of cardboard. This cardboard with these big holes on the top might allow for excess moisture evaporation. Just give it one more layer of extra protection. Try to help keep the evaporating moisture down in the bin. Okay. Oh yeah, back to the heaviness. Okay. This bin, like the two sister bins, has been fed regularly, and you could tell when you lift it, it's got some good weight to it. Now I kind of miscalculated. I forgot that the pumpkin bin is back in service here and needs food, so I was divvying up the food as if I was pacing myself, I guess, if you will, so that I'm only left with about enough to feed one more bin. So I guess, you know, in this particular case, in the case of this bin, I could feel huge chunks of food everywhere. So I think it'll be fine if I just sort of divvy up what's left, half and half for the remaining 2 bins, and leave them be with kind of a small feeding, because I mean this thing is full of in-progress food, and I mean full. There's just food everywhere. So just gonna add a little bit more stuff in here that gives it a chance to start decomposing, and that should be adequate. Let them have a little bit of melon too. My last bin is a little tiny bin, so it doesn't need a lot, I don't think. So I'm just going to give that last little tiny bit to the shoebox bin. This bin is super busy. Anywhere you look, it's just crowded with worms. Okay, let's cover up the feeding zone and get that last bin fed. I don't think there's even any coffee left for that last bin, just those few chunks of veggie and melon. Moisture levels in this one are pretty much perfect. Once again, very light. Get used to lifting those heavy bins, because the vermicompost is very heavy. As are the worms when you got a lot of them. Okay. The bread in this case is taking a little bit longer to deteriorate. I still see some vividly colored stuff down here, like, what was that right there? It was apple from last time. Some of this dry stuff over here. Push up what's happening to the edges. I'm going to try not to break up these old chunks of food like this apple. Try to keep it as a whole. Just more interesting that way, I think. Move it off to the side. Fill other large chunks down here on the side. Get a couple of them back down. Back down into here. Just drop in the new stuff. Okay, last little bits. Drop it all right in. Perfect. So I did have a friend of mine ask me the other day if I could hook her up with some composting worms. And I told her naturally I could. I think she still has to convince the family at home that she's going to do this. It might not be that easy a sell. But once she's ready, I was thinking that these could be the ones that I give her. This is like a good size. She can just drop this right into a larger bin once she gets herself established, and let them take over in that new space. So I'm not going to push it. I don't want to be some sort of a vermicompost pusher, but once she's ready, these little guys are on the ready as well, waiting to go to service. A little brighter piece of paper to see where the last feeding occurred, a little bit more cover, and a lot more cover. All right, everyone. Hopefully you enjoyed your little visit to see how things are happening in my wormery. I just got to clean up a couple things and I'll be done, but I won't keep you around for that. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up. I always appreciate that. Thank you very much. So see you next time. Thanks for watching. Bye.